Hi, this is Linda with Mom's Backyard Garden. Hi to all my orchid lovers. Today we're going to talk about how to care for orchids, basics, Orchid 101. Let's get started. We're going to start with this big guy. This is one of my newer orchids that my daughter gave me. And as you can see, it's still in bloom. So I'm not going to fool with this orchid while it's in bloom. Now, I haven't taken this out and repotted it. I've left it alone because it's got flowers on it and I don't want to play with it. If you play with them too much when they have flowers, they tend to start dropping flowers and get really irritated, I suppose. This one is in a moss. This is how it came from the store. It's got a very large flower spike. I can get this into the light here. This is what we would call a flower node. That's where they would bloom from. Here's another one. Every little spot like this is a flower node. Could possibly bloom another flower spike. We'll go all the way up here. There's a really good node. Now, sometimes I take the sheath off of this node very carefully. I'll show you that later in another video. And put some cakey paste, which I'll explain what that is in the other video. And I might get another spike out of that if it's stalemated. So, in the meantime, let's talk about watering. A lot of people are unsure how to water. And most advice when you buy orchids is just use. This would be a no, no, no. You need to think about orchids where they naturally live. They are a tropical plant. They live in the rainforest. They like to grow in Hawaii and places like that where it's really warm. They don't want ice sitting on their roots. So, how much do you water? I water about once a week or so. It's really depending on your house, how humid your house is. Mine's very dry, especially in the winter time when the furnaces kick in. We live in upstate New York where it gets very cold, so watch your plant and water accordingly. When it's dry, give it water. If it's wet, don't. I can feel this is really dry. It's crinkly, completely dried out. This is sphagnum moss. And this is generally how you get them from the market. Sometimes they come in a orchid bark, which the orchids like. Now, I'm not going to repot this until it's all done blooming, and then I'll consider whether or not it even needs to be repotted. I haven't pulled this up out of here. It's in here pretty firm. This is a clay pot. They tend to like that. So I'm probably just going to leave it alone. The roots look really good. They're really green. And maybe it'll bloom more flowers. So let's move on to another one. Now, orchids like it to be humid, so I run a humidifier where I have my orchid plants. Now, this is one that was gifted to me recently from my daughter. She brought me several from somebody who just didn't want to fool with them anymore. And this was in a pot. All of them that I got were completely dried out. So I haven't taken this apart. It is in the moss. You see they pack them very tightly. This is kind of a long, slow process to take all this moss out. And it does make a mess if you do that. Make sure you have a box or something to set it in. So these are the roots that are inside the pot. And now these normally come packed really tight in one of these pots. This was a much smaller pot it was in. I took it out of the original pot. I put it in this pot so it could breathe a little bit. And there's water in the bottom there. And now this pot sets down inside of that. And see, the water is just below it. So the plant's roots can just touch the water. See how they're wet? These are getting too wet. Now this one is soft and mushy. I will take it off. See how that slides right off of there? I'll come up here to where it's firm. I'm actually going to go in here and cut this right there. Throw this piece away. Check this one. This one's not too soft. It's got a soft spot here. You see this dark black stuff? Well, you don't want that on there. So I'm actually going to go ahead and come up here to where I find hard root, whether it be white or green, and I'm going to clip it right there and try to take some of that black off, because I don't want that on there. And I would go through here and check all of this and take this, any dry skin, it's root, but it's the skin of the root. I would go here and feel all of these, and anything that's soft, mushy, disintegrates in your hand, just pull it off, cut it off. Doesn't need to be there, it's dead. So I'm not going to take this apart right now. Eventually I will take this all apart and clean up any bad roots, unnecessary roots, and repot it. And I'll probably either leave it in very little moss or orchid bark mix. So the reason I'm not taking this apart is this one actually grew a flower spike since I've had it, which is bared a very short time. This is nice and fresh, and really soon here in the next couple, well, probably anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, we'll have new flower blooms on this. So I'm not going to leave it alone. I will check and make sure there's water in the bottom. It's not sitting in water. It's not floating in water. You don't want that, because it will cause all your roots to die. But it is getting moisture from that. So we're going to leave this guy alone. And he's happy. Now let's talk about placement of your orchids, where you keep them. Orchids like a lot of light, outdoor light. They don't like the sun to directly hit them. It will burn up the leaves and possibly kill them. They like to be in a window where they're not getting direct sunlight, but a lot of bright light. They do like that. I have mine, because I have a small house, I don't have the proper window to put them in. I'm testing one over here behind me in the window. We'll see how it does. But mine usually sit on a plant stand, and I have lights that I ordered from Amazon, plant lights, and they're under those lights all day, and then at nighttime we turn them off. They're set on a timer. So lots of bright light. Now, how do we know when our orchids are happy? I know when mine are happy because they show a lot of green at the tip of all the roots here, and they can grow really long roots. That tells me they're happy. And this one is actually going to bloom. It's got a flower spike. I'm really happy about this. This little guy has bloomed for me several times. And now these I have in self-watering pots. See, this is like a shoestring that runs through the upper pot and out 2 holes in the bottom. Let me see if I can get it apart. Now, I ordered these pots off of Amazon. I got a set of 5. This is a smaller pot. And I can't tip that too much, but you can see the shoelaces that come out the bottom. That's what I call them. So I can water from down at the bottom right there, and I know how much when my plant is getting low on water. I let it get pretty low down here before I add more water to it, because I want to give a slight drying period for it. But it seems to be happy, and things must be going good, because all of the ends of the roots are green like this, and it grew a flower spike. So that's a happy plant. Is also another happy plant. I've had this guy a long time, several years. I've never actually gotten it to bloom. I'm hoping this winter, in the next few weeks, maybe I can get it to go ahead and grow a flower spike. And you can tell this is an older plant because these leaves are so dark. These have been on here a long time. And they're very stiff. That's how you want your orchid leaves to be, stiff. If they're soft and you can roll them up, this orchid would be very dehydrated if that was the case. And I'll try to find one here that is like that to show you. This guy seems to be pretty happy because he's got all these green roots. And if we look in the bottom of this, it has actually grown on its own that green root down into the water. They will search out moisture on their own. So I'm not putting them deep in the water, which is what we call a water culture orchid. It just lives in water only, no soil. These I have in clay balls that I ordered from Amazon. And they seem to like them. It's easier for me to work with them. But they do hold a lot of water in there and moisture and stay wet a long time, which will cause your roots to die. So if you do use these, keep that in mind. So I try not to ever pour water in here. I always water from the bottom so it doesn't stay all wet inside. So let's talk about when you water your orchid. Never get water between the leaves, because what will happen is it will accumulate down in the bottom here, all the way down inside of here, and you'll get root rot, and there's almost no coming back from that. So when you water, always make sure if you get water in here that you dry it out right away. Don't leave it in there. And if accidentally you get water in the middle here, push come to shove, you can always take this orchid out, turn it upside down, and let it hang for, I had one, my big one over there, that happened to a few years ago, and I let it hang for about 3 or 4 weeks upside down, and I had moss underneath it that I kept moist, so it did have moisture it could get, and it stayed like that until it dried out and the leaf got firm again, because the leaf was about to come out of there, it was about to die. So I actually did save that, which I'm surprised. This is another container. I like these a lot because it just sits over the water. And yes, those are green because that's what's going to happen after a while, is you're going to get a moss growing in your water. So change it often. I don't never spray directly on my orchids because I'm worried about getting the water in there, as we spoke about. So most of mine are in self-watering containers except for a very few. And they seem to do pretty well like that. Now let's talk about fertilizing. You should fertilize your orchids often, like every 2 weeks, 4 at the most. Like every time you water your orchids, you should fertilize. Now I use this, you can spray these on there pretty often because this is a really low fertilizer. It says nitrogen, potassium, and some other stuff. But this is only a 2%. So when I really want to fertilize, so these are some of the fertilizers I like to use. And we'll talk about the numbers on them. Get the glare off of that. So if you want your plant to be nice and green, then you're going to need nitrogen. And this first number would be your nitrogen. So this would really give it nitrogen, as it's a 20. This one, not so much. So if you want to get blooms out of your plant, then you're going to look at the middle number. And that is the phosphate. And then that last one is your potash. So that middle number is what's going to give you a better bloom. It's going to put on more flowers, and that's why I have this one, which is a much higher number, because I want to get these orchids to flower. So this is what I would fertilize them with. And you just follow the directions on the back. It's about a tablespoon or 2 for a gallon of water. And this is a powderized form. You would just put this in your water, mix it up good. And then when you water, if your plants are in, let's see, Now let's use this one for example. I know it's a rough looking orchid. It's one of my rescues, but she's doing okay. So I would take this one. Oh, she's attaching herself to the container. Interesting. I would put this one, if you have a plant that's in a pot like this, you would put it in a container of water and fill it up just to here. You don't want to get water way up here, and you would let it soak for an hour. Hour's a good time. And then take it out and then let it all drain out. And so I would let it soak for an hour and then take it out and let it drain out good. Don't let it allow to sit there and just be really, really wet, because that would be bad for it. And this is some of the orchid mix that you would plant your plant in, and you can get this and the fertilizer at most any store. This is a bark. It's tree. Orchids like to attach themselves to trees, so they really do like this wood mix. I highly suggest when you get this, and if you're going to repot an orchid, to be sure you take, I put this mix in the plastic container by itself, and then I run a lot of really hot water through it. You want to rinse your orchid mix really, really well. I found in the past, when I was learning, that if you don't rinse this out, you're going to get a lot of impurities in your orchid, and the orchid is not going to be happy, and eventually it's probably going to die. So really, really hot water will kill any bad bacteria in this. You could even give it a spray of a 50-50 water peroxide mix. That is a good antibacterial for your orchids. When I'm cleaning orchids, sometimes I will spray the roots with that mix, 50-50 water peroxide, and let them air dry out. So let's talk about some myths about orchids. They say don't put them in a draft. You could set up a small fan in the room to blow across your orchids, or at least in the room with the orchids, and they actually like it. They grow in nature, they grow out, they usually attach themselves to the tree, the trunk of the tree, and so they have all that covering from the leaves that keeps the sun from hitting them. They do like the rain in the summertime. If you have a place out back in the shade where there's not getting hit with direct sunlight, you can put them in the rain, but just keep in mind you need to dry them in the middle when you bring them in. And when they grow in nature, they attach themselves to a tree. Let me find one here. I'll use this guy that's in what I call the orchid hospital. He's in a little moss and he's coming along here. As long as there's still leaves, and they're firm leaves, they're not floppy, they're firm, and the spike is still green, I have hope this orchid's coming back. I should be seeing soon it'll start growing new roots out of here. But in nature, when they grow, that's soft, so that needs to come off. They'll attach themselves to the tree and they'll hang downward, so the leaves hang over, and when it rains, it doesn't get up in the middle. They're smart like that. So when you water, don't water in the middle. If you do, hang them upside down for a while and they'll dry out. So if you like this content, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. And when spring comes, we'll be back in the backyard talking more about outdoor gardening, outdoor plants, tomatoes, peppers, squash, all that good stuff. Winter months, I'm going to be talking about my indoor plants. So we'll see you next time here at Mom's Backyard Garden.